Yeah, that is very hot mic.
Hot mic.
Hot mic. Hot mic. See if anybody shows up. Chaos.
25 watching now. But they may just be on from last week. Now 42.
They're just 25 people who are preparing themselves for disappointment.
Looks like a random number generator.
It is a random number generator. That's exactly what it is. All right. Here we go. Oh, there's me talking to myself. Okay, good. I just found out how long the buffering sound was for. All right, cool. Got so much stuff going on right now. Got different machines going. I'm still working on my thing back here. You see that? Did I show you this, John? See
no.
that? Do you see this controller right there?
No.
That's a X Arcade controller. Do you see the little white ball there? And this is it's an arcade controller, and I'm putting a Raspberry Pi inside.
Wow.
See, this is the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to mount. I got to get all the cables figured out, though. I'm going to mount the arcade inside, so then I can plug it in to HDMI, and then it will be a like a portable arcade machine. I can take it over to people's houses and play Pac-Man.
Nice.
Good, important stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey, friends. It is the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. Damien is on vacation, and not only is he on vacation, he is aggressively on vacation. So much so that he is replying to tweets asking, desperate for support and assistance with animated GIFs of himself on vacation. That's how deeply on vacation Damien is, which is pretty exciting. In fact, it's I would say I wish I could be on vacation like that. I wish I had that strength of will and emotional power.
It's a vicarious vacation through Damien.
No, I can't do it. I'm not strong enough. But instead, we have someone even cooler. We have Diego Vega. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you for calling me cool.
Cool. Excellent. All right. So
doesn't happen very often.
We get what you can. People have been asking about EF Core for many weeks. You can see the people in the chat here, the live chat on YouTube, who are excited to talk to you and want to know what's going on with the framework core, what we should know. And you're in the call here as well. So if you want to theoretically, share your screen and code something spontaneously, you can do that as well. Because we have such limited time and a guest, we're going to pass on the community stand-up links. John is queuing them up for next week, so don't worry about that, folks. John, of course, is pointing out if you say #question in there, we can go and talk about that. Cool. So let's see if we can get some EF questions. Are you able to see them as well, Diego?
No, I actually didn't connect to the...
Yeah, go to the live.asp.net website.
So just click on the link at the top.
Okay.
The
title of that.
And then you'll want to hit pause. And you'll see them flowing through over there.
I see. Perfect.
Yep. Cool. And also then if you do want to share your screen, if you have any slides or whatever, you can do that too.
Slides?
All right.
Slides? How dare you say
slides?
Are you serious? You brought actual slides? When did you start making slides? There you go.
I copied something that was already made.
Oh, there you go. That makes me feel better. No. Well, yeah. What do you got?
Yeah.
While people are writing their questions.
Okay. Let me share the desktop. First time I'm going to do this. And that was...
Okay, so it's changed now. So it's that green button.
Okay.
And then share. Yeah, they move it around depending if it's a call or...
Okay.
The production values on this is so high. Oh, okay, cool. So EF2 features, EF Core 2.0 features, extensibility improvements, lifecycle hooks. People are asking already, when is many-to-many mapping going to happen? There's a question from Zeze Lazo.
Okay. So I can try to respond to that one first. So actually, that is in our backlog. for some context for people that haven't tried this in EF Core, in EF6 we had the ability to map directly a many-to-many relationship, meaning that you could have an entity that had a collection of other entity, and then on the other side, the other entity also had a collection of the first entity. Let's say employee territories is one of the canonical example of that from the Northwind database, or a teacher classroom is another typical example. In EF Core, you need to have the link table mapped to an entity, and that's a limitation in 1.0, and I think it's going to be a limitation on 2.0 as well, but it's one of the items that we have in the backlog that we are getting a lot of feedback that people want to get rid of that link table. So basically not get rid of the table, but get rid of the entity map in the middle. And we have a good idea of how we're going to do it. We have this concept of shadows, the ability to have properties that are not actually mapped on the POCO objects. And the idea for this would be that the whole entity would disappear. So basically, EF would know about it, but when you get results materialized from queries, you wouldn't get an instance of a CLR object for that entity. We would just track it internally in the context. But we haven't prioritized that yet because we are working on so many other features that are also, I would say, more basic than that. So this is something that is not a super nice experience, but it's doable if you map the link table. It's not a blocking issue.
So there's a lot of context there, a lot of information, but I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions about many-to-many mapping. You said it's on the backlog. The nutshell is, yes, it's going to happen, or no, it's not going to happen. And is there a discussion or a GitHub issue people can watch?
There is a GitHub issue. I can look it up later and post it.
Okay, cool.
It is going to happen, but not in 2.0.
So this is more of a 2.x thing.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because it is the #1 thing I hear asked, and I'm sure you know people are asking a lot of that about that one as well.
Yes, there is that. Another big issue that we hear about is the ability to do TPT, which is an inheritance hierarchy. I don't know that everybody knows
inheritance hierarchy.
Hierarchy. Thank you for fixing my pronunciation.
No, I apologize. I'm just trying to be clear.
Thanks. So the idea is to have a mapping in which you have a hierarchy of entities, and then each derived entity maps to a different table, but all the base properties, so all the properties on the base class are mapped in a base table. And that's a mapping that also we don't support right now, and it's something that we want to support, but it's also not happening in 2.0. It's going to happen a bit later.
Okay.
Just to mention another ask that we have, another requirement that we have from customers very often.
I pasted the GitHub issue for that many-to-many, and that's 1368.
Thank you.
Okay. Is EF Core something that works on Xamarin? Is it EF Anywhere? People are asking about Xamarin, Xamarin Forms, iOS.
So we are talking to the Xamarin folks about that. I believe that the current state of the world is that it works on Xamarin for Android, and it's going to work on the next version of Xamarin for iOS as well. There is a limitation in the current version of Xamarin for iOS on how it deals with compiled link expressions that prevents it from working. So because all these platforms are actually use programs that are compiled ahead of time, compiling expressions and generating code at runtime, they use an interpreter to work with compiled expressions. And that's a limitation that they have, but they are fixing it. So in general, I would say it's a work in progress. We welcome any help that we can get from customers and from people in the community that are trying it and finding issues, because we don't believe that it's super polished right now, but it's starting to get in a good shape.
Cool.
Okay. Scrolling. Miguel Alfonso Abreu Ortega says, is there a plan to think harder about domain-driven design, mapping keys to value objects instead of built-in types?
So we do have something coming in 2.0. In this list, it shows up as complex value type pattern. I don't know that it's going to match exactly the expectations that somebody from the DDD community would have on what the value object is, but I think it's much closer to the current situation. And the idea that we have is to have the ability to define in the model that there is an object that is owned by another object. So let's say that, I don't know, customers have addresses, and those addresses cannot exist as free instances. They need to be associated with another object, and they kind of get the identity of the parent object as part of their identity. They don't have their own identity. We are working on enabling that by adding some new building blocks to EF core. For instance, one of the small features that you need in order to enable that is to have the ability to split a table, the mapping of a table across multiple objects that we are going to enable for 2.0. So it's going to look like in the first iteration of this, I don't think that it's going to be complete, but it's going to look more and more like support for aggregates in EF core.
We're on the camera, by the way.
Okay.
No worries. Cool. People are saying they'd like plus 1,000 for custom types just came out there. People freaking out about custom types.
Yeah, that's another feature that I love, and it's going to happen. Not
All
in 2.0, but it's going to happen.
Here's an interesting philosophical question that we might all want to rein in on. This gentleman is saying, Robert Slaney says that he's in a religious war. This is always a bad idea. Religious wars are always bad. Between stored procs and EF, what compelling argument do you suggest he uses to get people to use for EF? I would just say to start that I came from a place that was very EF, so very stored proc focused, in that the people who were the database kind of guardians insisted that all database access be going through the stored proc, and it was more of a control issue, and we found out that it was less technical and more about they insisted on having control over their database, and the only way they could impose their control was by forcing us to use stored procs. Once we pointed out that they could do control over things like indexes and usernames and making us have access to certain columns and not other columns, we opened them up and we moved to a more open format that wasn't stored procs. What do you guys think?
So I completely agree with that. I have participated in teams that were doing that, using that approach also to development of database applications, I guess. And I can see the reasons to try to go with something like that. My ultimate goal is that people that want to use stored procedures can use them either with EF Core, or at least they can use them with .NET Core in general, with ADO.NET Core or any of our technologies. I don't want to force an option on a customer to not use stored procedures, because that I may not understand exactly why they want to do it. In general, when we build something like EF and EF Core, our goal has been to make it easy to express very rich queries, and that's something that is usually in kind of tension with the idea of moving all the control to the stored procedure area. But you can see a similar pattern when people decide that they want to write repositories, is that they want to encapsulate all the data access code in a single place. It happens to be written in another language that is not SQL, it's C#, but still it's like, okay, now you can create this kind of isolation or between different layers, and you can have an owner that owns the data access code. It's a similar thing, it's a similar motivation, I believe, and we are supportive of anyone that wants to do that. It's I think it's a user choice. I don't want to be prescriptive against using stored procedures or other patterns.
All right. More questions. Is support for NoSQL providers still planned? And if so, what priority is that?
So we have it planned. The reality of that is that initially when we created the F-Core, we said and we decided, we made a very clear decision that we wanted to be kind of post-relational. It's going to include relational databases, but we wanted the model to support other databases. And as soon as we started writing the code and everything, we kind of get submerged into the relational world. And we decided that, okay, from what we are hearing from customers, they really want SQL Server, for instance, to work very well, and they want SQLite to work very well, and they want Postgres. We had great people from the community working on that. And we have spent more time that we wanted on making that work as well as possible. And we are going to, for some time at least, still be focused on creating relational features, but we want that model in which within the same application, even different data sources. And we have a few ideas of what we want to do with that in the near future, but nothing to announce for to. Like one of the things that I believe is in this list is an opportunity for us to build it in a way that is basically a different provider that is not relational. We are not sure we are going to be doing the whole thing, though, for 2.0.
Cool.
Okay. Any talk about the Oracle DBase EF Core provider? I saw that Oracle made an announcement, and some of it was positive. Some of it sounds like they're waiting and seeing. Do you talk to them? How does that work?
So we talked to them, and I am a bit more optimistic than saying, okay, they are waiting and seeing. I think that they are actually also positive on supporting it. But I think they completely own the message, and I would be bad if I try to make any promise from them. But we are working with them, and I think I'm very optimistic of what's going to happen. The other detail that is also in this list that we believe may be an enabler for the open source community to support Oracle is this ability to write ODBC-based providers. We actually had a person recently working on the team as an intern that ported the system data ODBC driver that existed in .NET Framework to work in .NET Core. And we tested it already on Linux and Mac, and it works great with ODBC providers. I think that we are probably going to have another option for anyone that wants connectivity to databases that maybe are not officially supported by the vendor.
Here's an interesting question from Carlos. He's asking, is it possible to map tables to tuples instead of custom classes? So you don't have to create a little DTO for things like queries.
That's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah. So currently, no, it's not possible to create a mapping in the model to say, okay, I just want to use this tuple instead of an entity type. It's possible to write a query starting with an entity and then do a projection into a tuple. And that works just because on the link provider that we have in EF Core, basically everything works unless we have a bug. So when necessary, we switch to client evaluation to in-memory evaluation of things. So if you need to materialize a tuple and we know how to do that in memory, then we will just. So we have a feature that it may be here actually, or maybe not. Yeah, query model level entity. No, that's not the one.
Are you sharing your screen? Are you changing your screen?
I was sharing it.
Sharing.
Yeah, I'm seeing only his PowerPoint.
Oh, that's what I was mentioning.
Okay, my bad.
So the thing is, we want to enable people to write queries with ad hoc types. So basically a type that is not necessarily in the model, but they want to write a link query, and maybe that query, in most cases, is going to start with some SQL. So there is this feature that we have in EF Core that is called the from SQL method, that you can use it to bootstrap a query. So you can write some SQL and say, okay, and by the way, the type that you need to materialize for the results is this tuple. There are other things that we will consider to do in the future to make it more flexible. But that's the current situation.
All right, cool. I think we're having questions go by faster than we can answer them here. Oh, here's a tough one. Right now, this is from Joseph Musser. Right now, entity classes have a fairly limiting number of restrictions. In some ideal world in the future, will EF be flexible enough to map any C# domain model to a database?
So we actually have something, a very important item in the backlog that is about that. Instead of promising that we are going to be able to use any type, I would say there are restrictions that we want to remove. And eventually, I think that we are going to be in a much better place. Like today, the pragmatic definition of a POCO object is super restrictive. It's basically a class that uses properties, public properties most likely, and it has a parameterless constructor in it, and then EF can use it. We want to get closer to the actual definition of a place. It has some constructor that it may not be parameterless. It has some state in it, maybe properties, maybe fields. Some of them may be private, some of them may be public. And EF can use a convention to decide how that state should be mapped to columns in a database. And otherwise, we can maybe provide like some methods to say, okay, I want to map it this way. There are like many restrictions today, and we want to remove them, and we have a list. Maybe you can find or I can try to post later the link to that issue, and I would love if people can add comments there saying, okay, this is the restriction I hate the most, or this is the one that is the most important for me to get rid of.
Okay, so people can keep typing and keep giving thoughts in the chat here to give us a sense of what we should prioritize on. Here's a tough one. We'll ask a mean question, Diego, and this is anecdotal, so don't take it personally. This gentleman is saying, I believe customers sometimes avoid EF because of bad performance. What are some of the reasons that people have a sense, whether it be correct or not, we don't know, that EF means low performance?
So I think that there is something that is just built into the concept of ORMs, which is it provides a higher level abstraction over accessing the database. If you know what you are doing, it's always going to be, it's most likely always going to be possible for you to get better performance out of like super simple code that just reads the lowest level possible API that you can use to talk to the database. ORMs do for you so that you are not every day and at all times aware of everything that is the most performant possible practice. You are going to get more or less a good performance, and you are going to get more productivity when you're writing the code. I think that at different times in the history of EF, we can see that we have hit like different levels of that compromise, like between giving you like a decent performance with more features, or really bad performance with very little features on the other extreme. I think we're making progress on giving you the really good performance without sacrificing many features, but also providing like escape hatches so that you can go do something. If you know how to write the SQL, for instance, that's going to perform the best for you to be able to write it.
So I'm hearing you say that the reality is going straight ODBC, ADO, straight select foo from bar, simply by the realities of computer science, is always going to be faster than a layered system that includes serialization and deserialization of objects. And if you look at something like Dapper or Massive or some of the things that often you get compared to, you are simply doing more work. It's the same thing that you see when you compare raw ASP.NET Core talking HTTP versus MVC. You can say hello, so you can say hello world with both, but the fact is layers add complexity. So is there a way to, when you know what you're doing, punch through EF and get it out of the way for a second, and then use it when it's productive, and then get it out of the way when you don't want it?
Yeah, sure. When you are using relational databases, first of all the underlying AD.NET objects are there, available on the context. The same connection that EF is using to connect to the database is there, so you can get the instance, open it, and do whatever you want using an adapter of whatever you want. And we have this escape hatch built in that is the from SQL method and the execute SQL query or SQL command, I don't remember the exact name right now, that you can use to execute SQL just the way EF would do it. Basically, that means we will open and close the connection automatically the way we usually do. And we can also materialize results. So you can take advantage of some of the pieces of EF without committing to the whole stack. So that means if you are using from SQL, you have the ability to write the SQL yourself and you know exactly what SQL you want to execute, just write it. What you are going to sacrifice in that case is if you had written that query as link, then you could use the same link query against different providers, different databases. You could use it against Postgres and SQL Server without memory, changing the code.
Even in memory for testing.
Yeah, or in memory for testing. But if you really know what you're going for, then just use that method.
I had a question from Adam asking about performance-wise, which is better, EF Core or EF6?
So it is, but basically it is faster. EF Core is faster than EF6, but we are not faster currently on every benchmark that we use internally. So we have a few things that we need to work on. We are also building some features in EF Core 2.0. There's one in particular that I like a lot that is for web applications that one of our developers came up with, which is to do pooling of DB context instances. So that means there is a lot of overhead in our usage of dependency injection to create DB context instances. So it's really not as cheap as we wish it was to create an instance of a DB context for each request on a web application. So what this guy, Andrew Peters, figured out was to keep a pool of DB context instances, and every time a request needs one, we just return one from the pool. When we stop using it, it gets back to the pool, and when necessary, the state of that DB context gets reset, but it doesn't need to be constructed from scratch every time. Wow. And that we are seeing a lot of improvements with that. The other feature that we have is explicit compile queries, something that we also had in EF6 and we had originally in Link to SQL. There is the ability to say, okay, I know I'm going to write this query. I need this query to execute very fast. I don't want to be calculating the translation of this query to SQL every time. So I'll just create a static variable for it or a static member for it, and I want to get a delegate that allows me to execute that query very fast every time. That's something that is coming into. It's not in this list, but there are like small improvements that we're doing for performance.
Miguel's asking if there's a way to, if there's a plan to allow detached object graph updates without fetch first.
I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not either. I was hoping you'd know.
So I have like, it rings a bell, but I'm not completely sure what he means.
Okay.
If you can clarify, that would be great.
Which question is that, John?
That is, just scrolled off my screen, rolling back. This is Miguel Abreu.
Is there any plan to attach detached object graph updates without fetch? Maybe he can expand on that.
So updating a graph of objects, multiple objects, without querying them from the database first to get, and then have them as a tracked object, I guess is.
So I imagine that could mean I have a graph of objects in memory and I make some changes to it without querying the database, and I want to reflect that change that I made on the database. Is that what you?
That's my guess.
So we have something that for that is called the track graph database. It's basically
Can you
like
say that word again? What is it?
Track graph.
Track graph. Okay.
Yeah, it's on the DB context on some of the subclasses inside the DB context. What it does is basically it's kind of a visitor for the graph. So it's a method that allows you to say, okay, I want to pass this object and I want to pass this delegate. And what the method does is walks the whole graph and it executes the delegate for you on every object. So the thing that we haven't done is to try to have a built-in convention-based version of that will just automatically try to extract from just a graph of objects what are the changes that you want to make. That is actually a hard, I mean, in my opinion, at least a hard computer science problem, or maybe just something that you shouldn't try to do. So to me, the ultimate way of doing that is to actually have two graphs of objects, like one that represents the initial state that you had the database in the database, and then the target state. And then when you can compare two graphs of objects, you can infer really what is the intent of those changes. So anything that uses a single graph of objects to figure out what needs to change on the database is going to necessarily use some assumptions and conventions on how to interpret the state of that single object as changes.
Yeah. So the kind of a follow-up question or follow-up explanation from Zeze Lazo was saying they want to, do they have to update their own logic to basically map an update of complex graphs in a disconnected scenario? They want to know like what the best practice is. They've created a graph of objects that encapsulates a series of updates. They're all disconnected, and then they want to go and say apply. That seems like a hard thing to do? And you're saying, yeah, that is hard.
But I have seen people do it. So the EF team did it many years ago. We tried to come up with a solution that would be high fidelity with the capabilities of EF, and it was called self-tracking entities, and it became somewhat popular. But it was really complex. It's like trying to duplicate all the logic of the stack in a disconnected graph was really complex. But I have seen people in the community come up with like more reasonable compromises to say, okay, well, there is I think one of those cases is called trackable entities, and you can probably look it up. It's a graph of entities that cannot do everything that EF would do, but on the other hand, it's much simpler and it's probably easier to use.
Okay. I have a build keynote review with Guthrie in 4 minutes. So we're going to have a hard stop here. Now, if Diego, if you have any cool code samples or anything, if you just happen to have Visual Studio up and you want to show us anything cool, this is a good time because we have to wrap it up. Otherwise, we can keep doing questions.
Can I pass?
You want to pass on that?
Yeah, I don't have anything cool. So, but we keep working on to make sure that we have cooler things.
Huh? All right, that's cool.
Maybe I can come up another day and show you something.
All right, that's definitely. You have an open invitation to come by whenever you want to and show cool stuff. Anytime you have a sample or whatever, just give me or Damien a heads up, and that'd be totally cool. Let's do one more question, John.
All right, let me see. Looking. No, I did see one. I don't know if it's the great final closing question, but somebody was asking about support for things like UWP native, .NET native support.
Okay, it is a great question. So that is also similar to Xamarin in a way. I consider it a work in progress. I think that we were optimistic in the beginning that .NET Native was going to basically be higher fidelity with the regular way the CLR works, and we hit a bunch of issues on that. We have been working with the .NET Native guys. They are actually super responsive, fixing issues in their implementation and also improving the performance on some aspects of it. But the main problem is EF core, something like EF core, and probably any link-based framework out there relies a lot on the ability to generate code at runtime using compile expression trees and things like that. And we use a lot of generics as well and reflection and things like that. And .NET Native, there is where they actually have the biggest gap in functionality between like normal CLR and something that needs to be compiled ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to work with them to different limitations, and I actually have a work item assigned to me to look at the current state of the world for that and try to update our guidance on whether you should be using UWP with .NET Core and DF Core, with DF Core in production, or whether you should wait a little bit for the final issues to be resolved.
Everybody's trying to sneak questions in at the very end. Can I ask one more?
Yeah, briefly. We have 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. So, question: EF Core support for environment-specific connection strings. I'm not sure. Is that something you'd even handle at the EF level, or is it...
If it is like the kind of ASP.NET feature that allows you to switch easily between different environments, I think that we have something in the tooling that allows you to say, okay, I want to the database using EF Core migrations, but by the way, when you initialize the environment, that's a command line option.
Okay.
If we don't, then we should.
All right. Well, one more question here. Let me see. So one, and then question about class diagrammer support in .NET Core. I don't know if that really... here's one. Plans for EF for Android, iOS, SQLite.
So that is, we talk about supporting Xamarin, and I mentioned that it was a work in progress. I think that's the way we get there to Android and iOS.
Yeah.
With Xamarin.
Okay. Well, not a question, but a statement from Zezo. He says, this was one of the best episodes. Yes, we missed Damien, but EF Core is a really nice topic and to have answers. So thanks.
Oh, glad that
more
somebody
Q&A
enjoyed
is
it.
what I'm hearing. More Q&A.
Yeah.
That's good. Sorry that we don't have unlimited time, but we appreciate you all. John, do you know how to do the dramatic zoom out?
Maybe. So first I have to zoom here. Just a second. Let me get to the screen. Okay, so first I have to zoom in. I'll zoom in on our microphone. How's that? So I'll go down, zoom in, and okay. Are you ready? You have to do the music. Dramatic
zoom out. It's so dramatic. John's learning. Okay, we'll see you all later.
Do I also need to move like this? Or like...
Bye-bye, everybody.
I don't know what the